The grand marble steps of Elijah Carter's mansion gleamed under the soft glow of the winter moon, the kind of light that made his sprawling estate look more like a palace than a home. As one of the most successful black billionaires in the country, Elijah had built his empire from nothing, defying every stereotype, every doubt, and every enemy who once swore he would never rise. Inside, the warmth of chandeliers and the quiet hum of classical music echoed across polished hallways, a stark contrast to the bitter cold that hung outside. It was Christmas Eve, and Elijah had just returned from a gala where he had donated millions to children's hospitals, feeling as though he had fulfilled his duty of kindness for the season. But fate has a way of humbling even the proudest hearts. As he approached his mansion door, adjusting his cufflinks absent-mindedly, Elijah noticed a faint shadow on the other side of the frosted glass. At first, he thought it was one of his staff, perhaps the gardener coming to deliver a holiday card. But when he opened the door, the sight that met his eyes nearly shattered his soul. There, kneeling on the icy steps, was a woman he barely recognized at first. His stepmother, her once graceful features now etched with exhaustion and humiliation. Her clothes were torn, her hair disheveled, and behind her, two little girls, his half-sisters, shivered violently, their lips blue, their fragile bodies wrapped in rags instead of coats. Elijah froze, unable to breathe, because in all his years of wealth and power, he had never imagined seeing family at his doorstep in such a state of despair. His stepmother's trembling voice broke the silence as she whispered, "Elijah, please, I had nowhere else to go." Shock coursed through him, because he hadn't seen her in over a decade. Not since his white father drove him out of the house with words sharper than knives, declaring that Elijah would never amount to anything. And now here she was, begging, her children sick, her pride crushed. "What happened?" Elijah asked, his voice barely steady. But before she could answer, his sisters coughed violently, a sound that clawed at his heart. How could children be left to suffer like this while he lived in marble and gold? And here's the question that burned in his mind and refused to let go. What good is all this wealth if the people who once shared your blood are freezing and broken at your doorstep? His stepmother tried to explain, her words tumbling between sobs. His father's cruelty, his aggression, his refusal to care for them after Elijah left. How he had turned even more bitter, taking out his anger on them, humiliating them, and finally casting them out into the streets when money ran dry. Elijah's fists clenched as anger and sorrow swirled in his chest. He wanted to scream at the injustice, to curse the man who had scarred both his childhood and theirs, but instead he did the only thing his heart allowed. He knelt down, wrapped his coat around his sisters, and whispered, "You're safe now. You'll never suffer like this again." With tears threatening to fall, he lifted them into his arms, carried them inside his mansion, and vowed silently that no matter what ghosts of the past haunted him, he would never let cruelty touch them again. The warmth of Elijah's mansion wrapped around the three figures like a long-lost embrace as he carried his sisters across the glittering marble floor. The younger one, Amara, buried her face into his chest, trembling from the fever that burned her tiny body, while the older one, Layla, tried her best to stay strong, though her fragile frame betrayed her exhaustion. His stepmother, Miriam, followed behind, her eyes darting around the grand home, not in awe, but in disbelief, as if the glow of chandeliers and scent of roses mocked the darkness she had endured. Elijah called out to his housekeeper, who rushed in with blankets, hot water, and soup, but as Miriam's shaking hands tried to help her daughters, Elijah could see the deep scars of despair carved into her soul. He had not seen her since his teenage years, when she tried in vain to protect him from the cruelty of his father, a white man whose rage knew no limits. Back then, Elijah was thrown out of the house for daring to dream, for refusing to be broken, and Miriam could do nothing but weep in silence as her husband's words shattered Elijah's spirit. Tonight, all those memories came flooding back. He sat beside Miriam in the drawing room as the children slept near the fire, their frail bodies finally wrapped in warmth. "Why didn't you come sooner?" Elijah asked, his voice both tender and heavy with hurt. Miriam's lips trembled. "Because your father made me believe I was powerless, that I was nothing without him. He controlled everything, Elijah. The house, the money, my life. I wanted to reach out to you, but he said if I ever spoke your name, he'd throw me and the girls into the street. And when his business collapsed, when the money dried up, he did exactly what he threatened. Elijah clenched his jaw, fury boiling under his skin. How could a man be so cruel, so heartless, especially to his own children? Miriam's eyes filled with tears as she whispered, I tried to be strong for them, but I failed. I failed them, and I failed you. Elijah shook his head, reaching for her trembling hand. No, Miriam, you didn't fail. He failed. He broke us, but he will not win. His voice cracked as he spoke, because though he was now a billionaire, standing on top of the world, he felt the old wounds bleeding again, the scars of a boy who once slept hungry, humiliated by the man who should have protected him. Miriam's voice lowered, heavy with regret. Do you ever forgive me for not saving you when I should have? Elijah looked at her, pain etched in his eyes, but also something else, compassion. He remembered her quiet attempts to slip him food, her tearful apologies when she couldn't protect him. And though part of him still ached from her silence, he could not condemn the woman who now stood before him, broken and begging. He exhaled deeply and whispered, You did what you could. I survived because of you, even when you thought you did nothing. Silence filled the room, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the faint cough of the children. And in that silence, Elijah asked himself the question that gnawed at his heart. What kind of world allows fathers to destroy their families, while strangers sometimes show more mercy than blood? He stood, pacing the floor, his mind racing with emotions. For years, Elijah had prided himself on never looking back, on burying the pain of his past beneath towers of success and oceans of wealth. But now, the past had walked right back into his life, cold, hungry, and broken, demanding not just his wealth but his heart. He knew what he had to do, not just to care for Miriam and his sisters, but to confront the ghost of the man who had caused their suffering. As he looked at the fragile girls sleeping near the fire, their small hands clutching each other even in sleep, Elijah made a vow deep within. This cycle of cruelty would end with him. No child of his blood would ever know pain again. And though the thought terrified him, he knew tomorrow he would have to face his father one last time. The winter sun barely broke through the heavy clouds as Elijah's car pulled up outside the crumbling estate that once belonged to his father. It was a stark contrast to the glowing mansion Elijah now owned. Where marble and glass gleamed, this house stood weathered, its paint peeling, its iron gates rusted. For years, Elijah had avoided this place, burying the memories of nights he spent trembling under the cruelty of a man who was supposed to protect him. But now, with his stepmother and sisters safe in his home, there was unfinished business to face. He stepped out, his tall frame wrapped in a long black coat, and walked up the path with a determination that grew with every step. Inside, he found his father sitting in a worn armchair, a bottle of whiskey by his side, his once intimidating presence diminished by age but not by arrogance. So the prodigal son returns, the old man sneered, his voice still sharp as a blade. Elijah's jaw tightened, but he refused to let anger cloud his words. I didn't come back for you, he said evenly. I came for them. The family you abandoned, the children you left to freeze. His father scoffed, swirling the drink in his hand. They're weak, just like you were. Always crying, always dreaming, never strong enough to face the world. And now you think your money makes you better than me? Elijah's fists clenched at his sides, memories of being called worthless flooding back. But this time, he did not shrink. This time, he stood tall. No, Elijah replied firmly. My money doesn't make me better. My choices do. I built an empire while you tore your family apart. I gave hope while you gave pain. And today, I choose to end your cycle of cruelty. His father laughed bitterly, his voice echoing through the empty house. You think you're a savior? You'll end up just like me, alone, bitter, with nothing but ghosts to keep you company. Elijah's eyes darkened, but his voice remained calm. The difference is, I don't run from love. You called it weakness. I call it strength. He stepped closer, his voice steady but filled with fire. "You may have broken me as a boy, but you cannot break the man I've become. You will never hurt them again." For the first time, Elijah saw something flicker in his father's eyes. Not remorse, but fear. Perhaps it was the realization that the son he once despised now stood as the man he could never be. Silence hung heavy, until Elijah finally asked the question that had haunted him for years. What kind of father destroys his own children just to feed his pride? The old man said nothing, his eyes dropping to the floor as if the weight of the truth was too heavy to carry. Elijah exhaled slowly, turning away. "I didn't come here for revenge," he said softly. "I came to tell you this. They are safe now, and they will never need you again." With that, he walked out, leaving behind the man who had once haunted every corner of his soul. Outside, the cold air hit his face, but for the first time in years, he felt free. He returned to his mansion, where laughter now echoed through the halls. His sisters were curled up on the sofa, wrapped in new blankets, their cheeks rosy from warmth and food. Miriam looked up at him, her eyes still tired but filled with gratitude. "Did you see him?" she asked quietly. Elijah nodded. "Yes, but he's no longer our future, only our past." He knelt beside the girls, brushing a strand of hair from Amara's forehead as she smiled in her sleep. For the first time, he understood that true wealth wasn't measured in gold or glass towers, but in the warmth of family, in the second chances life gave when love was stronger than hate. And as Christmas lights glimmered through the windows, Elijah realized something even deeper. He had not only saved his family, but he had saved himself from the shadows of the past.